Hello, I'm your host, Jean-Paul Baran, President of Focus on the Family Canada. Welcome to the Thriving Family, a Focus on the Family Canada podcast. The Thriving Family podcast is made possible by generous donors who support our ministry. In this season of the podcast, we're talking about communication and conflict, which is one of the most common topics people come to us about. Today's special guest is Andrew Montgomery, who came to our Canadian office from Focus on the Family U.S. headquarters in Colorado Springs. As Director of Organizational Development and Communications, Andrew creates opportunities for Focus on the Family staff to grow in their knowledge, skills, and abilities in the workplace and oversee the ministry's employee communications. He has been with the ministry since 2000. Prior to his current role, he served as the organization's Director of Public Relations. Andrew earned an accreditation in Public Relations in 2018 and an accreditation in Human Resources in 2019. Earlier, he completed a master's degree in Business Administration at University of Colorado at Colorado Springs and received a Bachelor of Arts in History at Trinity Western University in British Columbia. He enjoys running, reading books, and drinking good coffee. And he has patiently waited for the Vancouver Canucks to win the Stanley Cup. He and his wife Rachel have 5 children and live in Colorado Springs. Here's a fun fact. Andrew grew up in Langley, British Columbia, so our conversation ended up being a homecoming of sorts. So Andrew, thank you for joining us today. It's always great speaking to another Canadian and your representation of Focus on the Family Canada, being here with Canada, sharing on culture and how you've done that down in the United States. I'm just going to jump right into it, brother. We'll keep the Canucks talk for those that are on the West Coast. Your love for the Canucks to the side for now.
We'll do another podcast about that.
Exactly, anytime. So we're here just to dive right into it. We have a unique situation here. You are sitting in our head office here in Focus on the Family Canada, and you're born and raised in Canada, and you immigrated to the United States to work for Focus on the Family U.S. in Colorado Springs. And the intention is bringing you up here is to give you a little taste of Focus Canada and see if we can maybe bring you back. But I don't know if that's going to happen.
The breakfast was wonderful, so I'm listening.
It's like that every morning. We have breakfast every morning, big catered breakfast for our listeners. But one of the things we did this morning was we prayed, and we do that here at Focus Canada every day at 9 Pacific, praying for us as a staff and for those that have written in for their prayers. And we take that really seriously. But I'd love to hear a little bit about the similarities that you've experienced in Canada and the United States, in the same ministry that we work in. The same primary focus is helping families thrive globally, not just in Colorado Springs, not just here in Langley. We do it for Canada, we do it for the United States, and we're doing it globally with our global offices. And your view in that as an evangelical Christian.
Yeah. Well, JP, it is a pleasure to be up here at Focus Canada. This is exciting for me, as you mentioned. Focus Canada is located in my hometown of Langley, British Columbia. And so love to come back here, love to see what the Lord is doing here in Canada through Focus on the Family. And I really do think there are so many similarities between the work that I do, the work that we do in Colorado Springs, and the work that's going on here at Focus on the Family Canada, because wherever families are, and you would hear this when you talk to some of the international directors from our global offices as well, that the challenges that families are facing are not unique to a particular country or a culture, that it really is one of those universal languages that we speak. So to be in Focus on the Family United States, we are an evangelical Christian organization, and so we very much do things the way you do here at Focus on the Family Canada. We rely on the Lord. We seek to uphold biblical principles and offer hope and healing to families in the United States. But again, I think the challenges that the Canadian families are facing would be very similar to the families that American families are facing, which are very similar to the families in Australia and New Zealand and around the world. So in many ways, we speak the same language when it comes to family.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when it comes to family and Christians and evangelical Christians, there's so much weight to that. Even the word evangelical Christian, people look at that in two different realms. We're in a culture right now where it's very divisive. We see that up here in Canada, and from a lens as a Canadian, I see that down in the United States. But that's not just in the United States; that's all around the globe. But as Christians and Christian families, there's two things that I've noticed. One, when you're looking at a faith-based family, faith is first and foremost in their life. And the second thing that's there is their family and the importance of family.
Yes.
And when you strip that back even and take away the faith piece and you go into and we look into how to evangelize, people who have family, even if you're single or married or divorced, whatever the case is, family is the number one priority in their lives most of the time. They want to care and give back to their elderly parents or their kids or their cousins or friends of friends through their family. But tell me something. I like to dig deeper into that. Where do we see the cultural differences and divides that happen within our Christian brothers and sisters where family comes first?
Say a little bit more about that.
So in that, I mean, when I look at cultural differences as a Canadian, I see being born and raised in British Columbia. I'm a BC through and through.
Yeah.
My wife, Susan, is from Alberta. She's been in BC now over 30 years. We've been married for 27 years. However, she still has that Alberta culture.
Sure.
It's still ingrained in her. It's slightly different. And in my role as I travel across Canada and visiting with other individuals, I will notice that with my BC hat on and I'm sitting in Winnipeg, Manitoba, we speak almost a different language. And at times it's hard to relate. Now, that even comes from British Columbia to Alberta to Manitoba, Saskatchewan. Hopefully I get those in order right. And then you have Ontario, and then you move forward across the nation, hitting Quebec and the Maritimes. You know, as a Canadian, we often hear, well, Toronto's the center of the universe.
Yes.
And you have a different mindset from Torontonians than from Vancouver people. However, in that, I've found that the similarities we have similarities that we have coming as a uniquely Canadian is a love for Tim Hortons, a love for hockey. And then we could put those differences aside and say, okay, we love coffee and we love the sport of hockey regardless of the team. In our faith, and is what we do as a practice here at Focus on the Family globally and then specifically in Canada, is we're looking to thrive to help families. We're looking to help families thrive across our nation and looking to give the biblical support to families. But at times we see different cultural pulls that is not allowing us to break that divide. So I'm trying to get from your perspective how steps that you've taken to break that divide to help families unite and connect, build stronger, and how do we as a ministry build into them? How do we find the similarities, even so we have different cultures across provincially and then even geographically as a nation, U.S. and Canada?
Yeah, the Lord has done such a beautiful thing in the diversity of different cultures or different places that people have grown up, and you see this in marriages where someone perhaps is from Vancouver and someone else is from rural Alberta, Saskatchewan, and so even their upbringings would be very different, growing up in a city versus growing up in a rural environment, or different ethnic cultural heritages. And all of these things, I think if we have that mindset of of family being the most important thing. So in all of the differences that we may have, how do we come together and be open and honest and have discussions around those different things that shape who we are, with that overriding love for one another and that ability to bear with one another when things rub us the wrong way, and maybe someone doesn't love Tim Hortons, which would be shocking if I found someone in Canada who didn't. But to be able to really look at those things and say, that the Lord has brought us together as a family, and He has shaped uniquely who we are, our upbringings, the way that our personalities are. There's so many differences that come to bear on a marriage or on a relationship, parents and children, all of those things. But to, at the end of the day, see the family as this vehicle for the Lord doing His sanctifying work, to really helping us grow and shave off the rough edges with one another, but that really have a commitment to see that through, to see Him work through us. And again, I think having that ability to embrace and understand our differences, maybe even laugh at them at times, to be able to say, this isn't necessarily right or wrong. This is just we have two different ways of looking at things because of the way we were raised or where we're from, and seeing the Lord work in that, but having that commitment to see it through.
When we see what very well said, when we see the commitment and how to see it through, and how the Lord shines on families, we often hear, well, my culture is a little different and we approach things differently. My background, the way we communicated in our home was a lot of yelling.
Yes.
And the way my wife communicated in her home was a lot of silence when it came to conflicts. And that was a different cultural piece for the two of us to excel in our marriage. It was two different worlds. But what I always find fascinating here as a ministry, and how when we resonate with Christians that are trying to strive into a better spot and embracing our brokenness and understanding we are broken, and the culture that we all share is the love for Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And when we break all that down of all the other stuff that's there and realize we actually all have that same desire to love the Lord and to share that with others who haven't witnessed that just yet, that's what I feel that brings us together and allows our cultures, which sometimes can be divided, to say actually we're united through our Lord and our Savior. And so part of that is looking at how do we establish that? How do we find to bring that to the forefront for families that are struggling? In Canada, we try to do it in a very, the Canadians, there's a famous T-shirt out there that says, I'm sorry, I'm Canadian.
Yes.
And I want to hear your perspective as a Canadian that's living in the United States as how to bring to the forefront that we share the same love for God in all our cultures when we're looking at thriving marriages as Christians.
So much of it comes down to humility. It really comes down to understanding that the two of you, you and your spouse, you and your children, view the world in different ways. In some way, you are uniquely created by the Lord. There's only one you. And so to come into our relationships with that humility of understanding that we are a broken person saved by the Lord, and we come into our relationships, though, with some brokenness. I think understanding that and having that humility is just vital. JP, you would be... JP, I know Focus Canada has Hope Restored.
Yes, we do.
As a marriage intensive program that we also have in the United States.
For our listeners, we have the Hope Restored program here in Canada, which is a week-long intensive, which we do either in group intensives or with 3 or 4 other couples, or we do individual solo intensives. And the intent is to bring couples in to our retreat centers and to get them to a spot that where their brokenness in their marriage is not fixed, but they're working on the tools. The beautiful thing about this Hope Restore program that we run here, both in Canada and the United States, is that people who have come to it and have their marriage in a real tough spot, some have actually signed the divorce papers, and one of the people in the couple wanted to they want to give it a second chance or maybe a third chance. And we as a ministry try to break down any barriers that are there. So we actually will cover one of the costs for a family to come so that we don't hear, well, we're not wanting to come because of financial means. We have 3 of these retreat centers across Canada, one in Winnipeg, one in Toronto, and one in Calgary. And the one in Winnipeg is for Central Canada, Western Canada, obviously for Calgary, and then Toronto area where we can have access to 6 million people within a 3-hour driving radius. This Hope Restore program is one of the unique things about it is when we follow up 2 years later, there's an 80% success rate.
So with Hope Restored, it's amazing. As you said, a few years later, 2 years later, you have 85% of those couples who are still together and married. And one of the unique aspects of that Hope Restored model is as these couples come to the retreat center in a place of brokenness, in a place of really not having hope that their marriage is going to survive, you would think as you come there, your mindset would be very focused on what the other person is doing wrong and what the other person has done to hurt you. And our Hope Restored counselors are so good at acknowledging the pain and acknowledging that we hurt each other in our marriage relationships, but really helping to get the focus on what am I bringing to this situation? What are the things that I need to change to show up in the way that to be the spouse that I want to be? And it's that humility of looking at what am I contributing to this? And this is not blaming the victim or anything, and they're very careful at Hope Restored to acknowledge that there are things that one partner may be doing that are very damaging to the marriage, but that focus on what can I do differently. And I would say that goes beyond Hope Restored to our own marriages. Really, like what is it that I am bringing in this situation? It goes beyond marriage to the workplace. How am I showing up in the workplace? If I'm frustrated with another department or another individual in the workplace, having that humility to look at myself and say, am I showing up in the way that I feel like the Lord is calling me to show up? And when we focus on that, that can greatly change the way we are approaching our relationships.
Absolutely. So you've touched in a great segue of what it's like to be in the workplace and knowing that we come from humility and we are broken. And in our marriages, if we acknowledge the humility aspect and acknowledge that we are broken, the marriage has a better chance of succeeding. Mm-hmm. And that's the first step. And then looking at that as that's what we do as a ministry outside the walls. And then how do we do it inside the walls in that workplace? And you touched on the humility piece and the brokenness piece. And if we do that well as leaders, we're able to hopefully engage with those that are working with us by identifying, okay, I'm not great at this. How do I ask for help? And how do we build that culture within the walls of where we are? And for those that are listening, how do they take those elements and do it well in the area they're in? They might be in a secular piece where they don't have the ability to pray, but they can do it in a different way. So if you could tell me a little bit of how you've put those practices into where you're at. And we have something that is called the Focus 5 principles. If you can touch into that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot that does start with that humility and that understanding that God has drawn together a group of people to accomplish what he has to accomplish for that organization. And not everyone has the same gifts. Not everyone has the same strengths and weaknesses. But how do we as a team work together to achieve the goals that we have as an organization, as a ministry? And so there is that humility, and I think you touched on something very important, that it is so powerful when a leader demonstrates that humility. Because a leader's words, a leader's actions have such a ripple effect on the rest of the organization in terms of the tone it's set. So if a leader can show up and be vulnerable and humble, then it's far more likely that the staff, the people all the way down the line are going to feel like it's a safe environment for them to show up in the same way.
And you're absolutely right. When a leader is able to do that, people see that they're vulnerable and they're not put on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring it back a little bit to marriage even.
Yeah.
As a father, you have a father of 5.
Yes.
I have 2 daughters. And the most remarkable element in my journey as a parent with Susan is when I go to my daughters and I say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake in this one. And they look at me going, wow, like Dad actually, or they call me Papa. So they go, Papa, thank you. And then they look at it and it's like, yeah, he's willing to say that he was wrong or wants to improve. And that actually makes us even stronger as a family. Mm-hmm. As Susan and I leading our children, they look at us and going, they see that we're not perfect. What more important, because they see that all the time. Yes. Kids point out that you're not perfect all the time, or at least mine do. More importantly, they see that we're willing to say, you know what, we're not right. And we're asking for help from you guys.
Yes.
As leaders, as a parent, that's incredible. As leaders in a workplace, when we're able to do that with people, the staff that we work with, they see, okay, I can approach this person because they're willing to say they're not perfect in everything they do, or their way is just the only way.
Yeah.
Can you touch more into that?
Well, the thing is that they already know you're not perfect. See, sometimes as leaders, we have this mindset, well, I don't really want to admit that I'm weak in this area. I want to demonstrate that I'm competent and bold and decisive and all of the things that we want to show up as leaders. And they already know. I mean, this is true in the home as well. I love how you touched on that. Acknowledging that you've made a mistake, acknowledging that you didn't show up the way you wanted to show up. And that's not a surprise to the people in our families. That's not a surprise to the people in the workplace. So acknowledging it has such a great power because usually everyone in the office, everyone in the workplace are thinking, yeah, we knew that about 3 years ago. So I'm glad you're finally coming to the place. What took you so long? But the power in acknowledging it is it creates a space for it to be talked about. And when we don't acknowledge those things, especially as leaders, it can feel very unsafe for others to point those things out. Maybe he doesn't realize that he's showing up in that way. Do you want to be the first one to tell him? No, thanks. But as leaders, when we lead with that brokenness, when we lead with that vulnerability, we invite those around us to talk about it with us. And we invite a space where we can talk about it with them. It should not surprise any of us to be talking about the fact we have those weaknesses, that we have those areas that we're not strong in. Because again, that's the Lord bringing people of diverse strengths into a place to accomplish what he can accomplish with all of you together. And so it's so powerful when a leader leads with that.
Yeah, it often reminds me of what comes to my mind actually when you're sharing that as I look at our Savior Jesus Christ and how great he was in all he did. Mm-hmm. But his greatest is how he led in humility.
Yes.
When he knew that his time on the earth was limited. He's 30 years old. He knows he's going to sit at the right hand of his Father at 33. He's got a short window.
Yes. And
he led by bringing in people from all walks of life to surround him. He listened to all of them. He had a work-life kind of balance, if you will, if you want to go back 2,000 plus years ago, work-life balance, where he took naps in the middle of the day, was very intentional of practicing the Sabbath. We often see in our culture, and even in our building here at Focus Canada, is we got to keep moving. I have to respond to that email at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night, and then my kids. So I'm the one at fault here responding to those emails. My kids see, oh, Dad's working all the time, and how do we have that balance? How do we introduce that cultural piece of what's important to us? And that cultural piece to me is the important thing is acknowledging our Savior Jesus Christ, and then having these blips of time of when is work and when is home, like balance, and how do we put that into integrated into our culture at the workplace. One of the things I'd like you to kind of expand on that is we at Focus Canada have a large staff of, we'll say, about 90 people all in total, and a vast array of volunteers. And as a Canadian, that's a huge number. But I'm always, I just want to hear a little bit of how you guys find that balance and that cultural piece when you have a staff of over 600 people with a country of 360 million people that are searching for Christ and searching for balance. How do you have that within the culture of those numbers?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Jesus taking a nap. Right? Does that not highlight that our Lord still took a nap and modeled for us that idea of rest in the midst of ministry? And so when I think of Focus in Colorado Springs, I think about our president, Jim Daly, who right from the top, so our president will talk about the need to get out of the office at 5 o'clock, the need to take vacation with your family in the summer. Our chief operating officer, Ken Windebank, will often do the same. Okay, let's cut that part out. Ken would not want me to mention him. Let's go. Well, we'll go back to Jim. He does ask about it, but he's a good chief operating officer. Okay.
He's very good, but that's a good.
When I think our president Jim Daly will talk to us about wanting to make sure that people are leaving the office at 5 o'clock. He'll ask about whether we've taken vacation with our families in the summer. So yes, the ministry is the needs of the country are huge. The 300 million people who need the hope that we have to offer is huge, and yet still recognizing in all of that if we're not going to care for ourselves, if we're not going to invest in our own families, eventually we're going to be in a place where we can't help other families. And so understanding that need for rest, that need to disconnect, that need at night to just say, I'm not going to look at email until the morning. I'm sure that whatever is on the phone right now can wait, and to choose instead to read a story with your child or to throw a ball in the backyard, the things that don't necessarily feel as urgent in the moment, but ultimately we know are so much more important.
Right. You say it so well, and Jim does lead in that way. I recall a story he shared, and I'm paraphrasing, but I remember he talking to him about his travel load, and early on leading the global department before he stepped into the president and CEO, how he traveled so much, and he had a dad checklist, I think it was. And one of the boys said, you're away a lot. So he made a commitment not to travel in the summer, a commitment to his family and to his wife, Jean. And that trickle down effect where staff see, hey, the guy that's actually, running the ministry is taking time to be with his family. And that's a priority rather than, trying to reach everybody and help everybody at the same time. That comes into where we show our vulnerability. Mm-hmm. The challenge as anybody showing their vulnerability, regardless of where you are in the food chain at work or even at home, is how to share if it's too much or too little. I believe in talking about where we are being vulnerable in all aspects. And I believe that in a way where I share about my character defects, I like to call it, where I do get grumpy if I don't have my cup of coffee at a certain time. I do get grumpy if I don't eat at a certain time or get enough sleep. And it shows. I mean, you can ask Susan. She knows. And we have a good rhythm of when we talk about certain heavy things. It's not first thing in the morning. It's after we've both done our devotionals, we both had a cup of coffee. And then about 10 minutes after, we'll say, okay, where are we on this topic for our kids before we get into our busyness and before they get up? What I'm sharing, though, is, I talk about, my own, as I shared my own character defects. And I shared openly in a context with our staff of where I am, but I don't go too deep sometimes. Sometimes I try to keep it guarded. If you can talk about like how and where we go in our vulnerability, how deep should we go at times, and where's that kind of boundary that we put in place?
Yeah.
And I'll go more into that after hearing a bit of your thoughts.
I don't know that we need to scatter our vulnerability everywhere all the time. I believe in vulnerability-based leadership. I believe in being honest with my staff about my shortcomings and the character flaws I have, which I already mentioned. They know, but
they know it. Yeah, they all know it. They just don't tell you right away. Yeah.
But then I reveal it 6 months after they already figured it out. But
I share that same thing.
So I do. For me as a leader, I don't know how not to lead vulnerably with the people closest to me. That's just, I feel like my life is an open book. My leadership, my strengths, my weaknesses, I want to be very open and honest about those with the people that I work closely with. I do think that there is a place to establish a relationship with someone before going way too deep, way too fast.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that vulnerability, I think I always trend toward that. I want that in my working relationships with people. But there is a period of getting to know someone and getting to know their story and getting to know them a little bit as a person before you necessarily go deep. I don't know that there's a one-size-fits-all answer for this. I can think of it being very powerful for a leader to go first and to vulnerably share. But again, it's probably context. There's some context that you want to see. You want to build a bit of a relationship with someone first. But for many of us, that's not the danger. The danger is to go 6 months, 1 year, 2 years into a relationship and still be trying to mask what it is about us that we don't want others to know.
So that goes back, bringing back to like the culture and some of the Christian culture is putting that mask on. And like, you hear you go to church on Sunday and we're all in our Sunday best, if you will. And then the mask is on. How are you? Great.
Yeah.
The kids are in school. They're excelling. They all got A's or they go to university. And they come home, the house is a mess. The dog still needs to walk. And life is still there. And as Christians, I often find like we put that mask on and we even bring it into our workplace. In our workplace, when I found it so refreshing when a leader lets that guard down, even the pastor lets the guard down and says, but life is tough sometimes. It's great, though, because I have my Savior, Jesus Christ, carrying me in this. However, life is tough. And I'm sharing with you that here's some of the toughness that I'm going through. And when that happens, it just brings these walls down. And in leadership in the workplace, I find that if a leader has enough courage and strength to say whatever it is they're going through at a high level or low level, not going too deep, but going into it, the staff will say, okay, this individual is not just that corner office with the suit and tie and the exterior, if you will. I don't know if anybody wears ties anymore, but has that posture of like everything's perfect. When you open that door of that vulnerability and showing your brokenness, others are allowed to come in. And I believe it's a way, not only in the Christian world to do so, but even as a leader who is working in the secular world, if they open that door slightly, and you don't have to say anything too deep, it's like, just letting the guard down just slightly is a way of evangelizing where people might want to open up a little bit more. Often I find that, I live in this bubble where I work in a Christian organization that's awesome. Both my kids went to a Christian high school. My wife works in a Christian high school. Everyone around us is Christian.
Yeah.
But there was a season where I wasn't in that. And when I opened the door and allowed people in, it allowed life to happen within the workplace. And it allowed the culture of that workplace to shift from just getting A to B.
Yes.
And we allowed this wiggle room of allowing life to happen and share slowly of building these relationships. And it all started by being vulnerable and breaking that kind of barrier down.
I'll never forget, I was a young dad traveling for work at a conference, and there was an executive from Focus who was there and came up to me in the hallway and just asked how I was doing, how the kids were. And I was expressing some of the challenges. We had 5 kids, probably at that time under the age of 12. And so life was pretty busy and we were stressed out young parents. And this gentleman, who I had a great deal of respect for, who spoke a lot about marriage and parenting and how to have a healthy, thriving family, talked to me about the challenges he had faced and how he resonated with what I was sharing. And I tell you, as a young dad who felt this guilt and shame over the way that I sometimes showed up in the home, yelling at the children, getting upset over what I look back now at as not that big of a deal, but at the time felt like a really big deal. Earth-shattering.
The room wasn't clean.
I can't believe the milk is spilled. I look back at that conversation and what a encouragement it was to me to say, wow, even you faced those same things in your own family. It just gave me almost permission, not to stay where I was at, but to grow as a husband, as a father, but to know I wasn't alone in it. And I can think of examples in the workplace too. I share with staff about the time that I presented a project to our leadership team and forgot to breathe. So within 5 seconds, my voice was going up to octaves that had not been reached since I was 13.
You're going through puberty all over again.
And I was not breathing, and my voice was going up, and my boss was there with me, and she was looking at me, and all I could get out was, "Take it away, Jen." And we laugh about it now, but I use that story as an encouragement to younger staff, to people newer in their careers, that, I'm 24 years into life at Focus, and I speak in front of large groups at Focus, and now I am able to present things to the leadership team without...
Learned how to breathe.
I've learned how to breathe. But to even tell that story, I've had people come up to me to say, boy, that was really encouraging, because I see where you're at now and what you're doing here at Focus. But to know that was part of your story, and I could share many more like that, is an encouragement to them that, okay, what we see of others, then this can be in the workplace or in families, especially what we see in others is often what they want to present to us. We don't see all of the weaknesses and the failures and the stories that, if they would share, would be such an encouragement to us, because we would realize, boy, we're all in this together.
That's right. Yeah. And you touched on that story of someone coming to you early on in your career and sharing, and there was that similarity. And that's what happens when I feel, are vulnerable in the workplace, because people will pick up on that similarity. And so you'll have a high executive to somebody who just is on their first day. And the first day person is looking at everybody with like, oh my goodness, they got everything is all together.
Yes.
Like everything's perfect. They got the white picket fence. Everything is perfect. And then they realize that the person that they're thinking of that shares the same kind of fears and anxieties that they're going through on their first day, and they've been there for 24 years already, and they see that similarity. And then that allows a special culture to be built where a trust and a level of connection happens where you wouldn't get if you weren't able to say, you know what, first of all, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ in the areas that we both work in. At the same time, going a step further and saying, I'm not perfect.
Yes.
I am broken, and here's some of the things. And it could come from a deep kind of connection of like, from my upbringing of a divorced family and sharing that. Somebody was like, we have a similarity. To the simple, as I go back to, I really like Tim Hortons coffee. And somebody's like, well, how can you like Tim Hortons coffee? I thought you were a Starbucks guy or whatever it is, right? And then there's that similarity. And then that builds from there for building a very strong, safe work environment.
One of the powerful things that Patrick Lencioni, the author of The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a book that means a lot to us at Focus in terms of how to have a healthy culture. One of the exercises he uses when he goes to an organization to help build trust is this personal histories exercise. And it's so simple. It's so simple that you'd think to yourself, how could this possibly work? But he says, every time he wonders as he goes in to do it, is this actually going to work? And it does. And what it is he gets a team together and he has them go around the circle, share the hometown they grew up in, and what was one challenging thing from your childhood? And he's not necessarily asking, okay, what's your deepest, darkest, most traumatic thing that happened to you as a kid, but just a challenging thing. And people can go as deep or as not deep as they want to go. But the impact as people go around the circle sharing just one thing from their childhood has this effect of really starting to create a strong trust. You find out things that you didn't know about your coworkers. I remember we did this once with a team I was working with, and there was an individual on another team at the ministry that I had some tension with, some difficulty working with. And as we were going around the circle in this exercise, he talked about how he was bullied as a child. It changed the way I viewed him. Suddenly I had this new piece of information of, well, that must have been extremely difficult.
Right.
And what kind of effect would that have had on a person? Now, he was still responsible for how he showed up in the workplace, but it gave me this compassion to see a piece of him I hadn't seen before, and probably changed something in me. There was a bit more of a willingness to, hey, I want to engage with him as a fellow human being on this, because now I know something about him that I didn't know before, and helps to explain at least part of who he is today.
Right.
And so when we can be, you're exactly right. It could be about our favorite hockey team. It could be all sorts of different things that help us to get to know each other as individuals. But yeah, as we start to get a little bit more vulnerable, like what are the things that shaped us? How did we become the way we are? Boy, the Lord will use that.
Absolutely.
It's great power.
Absolutely. As we come to closing in this discussion of culture and really, bringing talking about vulnerability and how that's kind of a first step into building a strong culture. What are the things that you find that shape you, that shaped you in in the leadership that you are in at Focus US, in the parenting that you have with 5 kids.
Yeah.
Just tell me a little bit about that, maybe a quick story of how did God speak to you to lead in the way that you have, where you can take that mask off, not only at home or in the workplace?
I am so grateful for the way the Lord called me to himself through the love of people at my high school here in British Columbia, and a youth pastor at a church that spent a ton of time with us, a bunch of us kids who didn't have the cleanest vocabulary, but he would play ball hockey with us. He was the responsible adult who would rent the gym, and was so patient with us and answered the questions that I had about faith and who Jesus was, and all sorts of doubts and wrestling through different things. And he was patient, but the thing was that he loved us. He spent time with us. And I'm so grateful to that man for what he invested in our lives. And I look back at that and I think about that man. His name was Jim Loney, is Jim Loney. His name is Jim Loney. And the difference he made in my life that he might not even know today,
right,
because of the time and investment he put in me. I have often thought about that as a dad, as a husband. Obviously, we have so much more time and responsibility with our own children than a youth pastor does with someone with
right.
kids in the church, or not yet in the church. But recognizing that day in and day out, I have that opportunity to pour into my kids' lives in the same way, through spending time, through being curious about who they are and what they're thinking and how the Lord has made them. And to be honest about shortcomings. I mean, I look back, I have 3 kids in college now and 2 kids who still live at home. And I have so many regrets when I look back at the way that I showed up at times. Right. All of us have that soundtrack in our minds of memories of, I wish I had done that differently, and I wish I hadn't overreacted there, or I wish we had done more of this when the kids were young. And I look back at those moments, but I can think about the times where we were almost able to laugh about them. And I'll never forget this, and I don't know whether I want this to end up on the podcast or not, but there was a time my oldest son and I were having a conflict. He was probably 15 years old at that time, and voices were raised, tension was escalated, and then he decided to run off in the middle of my very inspirational talk to him. And so he ran into the bathroom, and I ran behind him and grabbed the door so hard that it actually put a hole in the wall.
Oh.
And about a half hour later, after we had finished the discussion, I go into the bathroom, and there around the hole in the wall is a picture frame and a sign that says "Dad's Masterpiece."
Oh, wow.
And it was just
Wow.
something where we were able to, how could I not?
How could you not laugh at that?
How could I not laugh
A few years later.
A few years later, right. And I just think, I look back at the times where I was able to be humble and able to acknowledge my brokenness. And in that example, even being able to laugh at that. And I still don't know whether I want this in a podcast because it makes me sound like a raging lunatic, In context, it wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad as it sounded.
It sounds like life. It sounds like life, Andrew. There's plenty of, I think I have plenty of masterpiece moments that my kids have for me. They affectionately say, "Grumpy Papa."
Yes.
And they know it, but that I think that's parental life. I think your son has a great future in comedic art, maybe.
Definitely.
The piece that you said on the man that was, the youth pastor in your life, what a gift that is now for you to be with staff members or people in your life. How many people have come in your life that you are the one that planted that seed? You're that Jim, I believe his name was
Jim,
it?
yes,
Jim Loney. You're the Jim Loney in how many other countless people's lives where you were that seed that planted the Lord in them. You were that seed that broke down and showed vulnerability in the workplace that you were able to create a stronger connection and stronger culture on work. What a gift it is that you've been able to do that. So I will continue, we as a ministry, lifting you up in prayer, lifting up your team as you lead Focus US in your department, and continue to planting those seeds of all those that you come across in your life, me being one of those. So thank you for your time today, and many blessings to you and your family.
Thank you, JP. It was a pleasure to be here today, and I pray the same for Focus Canada. This ministry is doing so much to help families all across Canada. I shared with your staff this morning that I put together 80 pages of the way that Focus on the Family has been able to help families from stories that I found on your website.
And as you mentioned, that's just those that are published.
Those are published.
How many more are out there?
How many more are out there? Only the Lord knows. But as I spoke with your staff, and we just gave thanks to God for the way that He had changed lives as the result of people being faithful day in and day out here at Focus Canada. And so I pray the same for this ministry, and am just so appreciative for what you all do here in Canada.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you for listening to today's special episode of The Thriving Family, a podcast from Focus on the Family Canada. I hope you were encouraged by this conversation with Andrew. If you wish to talk about this further, or if it brought up something that you would like to talk through, you can have a free one-time consultation with one of our registered counselors at Focus on the Family Canada over the phone. Give us a call at 1-800-661-9800 to request a consult. It's our gift to you. Thanks for listening to today's episode of The Thriving Family, a podcast from Focus on the Family Canada. If you like this episode, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to subscribe. If you feel led, you can make a donation at focusonthefamilycanada.ca/podcast giving. This program is available ad-free because of the generosity of our donors. Most importantly, please remember that we are here for you and your family.